The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is a really interesting story, and it has a great group of complex characters, and today I want to talk about it. Specifically, the two film adaptations, and how the choices made in the beginnings of each of these films sets them onto totally different paths while aiming to tell the same story. The novel created an iconic female character in Lisbeth Salander, a woman who wouldn't let herself be defined by the stereotypes surrounding women today, especially not by men. And so she's a really important character to get right in the film. And it's with her character that we see this wide divergence between the two films. This is the first video in a new series called The Double Take, comparing original films and their remakes to see how different directors interpret the same story in different ways. It's researched and written in part by my good friend Adam, who had the original idea for it. Let us know if there are any remake duos that you'd like to see us look at in the future in the comments down below. David Fincher is a talented director. There's no denying that. And he does what any good director should do. He makes thoughtful choices in regards to the composition, the shot structure, and the mise-en-scène of his films. And I would agree with anyone who says that David Fincher makes good movies. But it seems to me that he's very talented with a certain type of movie. I think it goes without saying that David Fincher has a canon of movies about men. And that's not to say that these aren't good movies, because many of them are, but that they focus very heavily on things like the male ego. Fight Club, Zodiac, The Social Network, Seven, The Game, and others all point towards this. And this isn't to say that he can't make films with good female characters, but that, in my opinion, his best films revolve around men. And he really missed the mark with The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, specifically with the character of Lisbeth Salander. While we do see growth in her character, and at the end, she does save the day, the way her character moves throughout the film strips away the agency and the impact that she had in the original Swedish adaptation and in the book. This topic came about after hearing people praise Fincher's version over Niels Arden Oplev's original adaptation. Oplev's film, titled after the book and then changed to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo for the US, is such a fantastic movie that delivers in creating a female lead unlike many seen in today's film landscape. I forgot to turn my extra lights on. Oplev's interpretation built up Lisbeth Salander as the heroic protagonist that people know and love from the book. And while the literal translation of her character might more closely resemble Rooney Mara from Fincher's version, the emotional and physical qualities that become visibly tangible through a cinematic translation were constructed in the Swedish film's Lisbeth Salander, played by Noomi Rapace. It's with the careful consideration of how Lisbeth Salander's part would be acted, filmed, and edited within the Swedish movie that the power of cinema really shines. Where Fincher's talents lie in piecing together a smart and stylized look, his version just lacks the visually poignant thematic interpretation of Stieg Larsson's story that's shown in Oplev's film. But you don't need to just take my word for it. Let's look at some actual comparisons of the two films and see how they show the character of Lisbeth in two completely different ways, ultimately creating two completely different characters. Both openings center on Henrik Wagner, an elderly businessman who receives a mysterious package that the audience eventually sees is a pressed plant in a frame.
What kind is it?
Same as last time.
And no note.
I can't take it anymore.
I'm so sorry, Henrik.
We see in Fincher's film that he sets the mood right away by filming in a wide 2.40:1 aspect ratio, giving the film a very distinct visual language and forcing your eyes to his very deliberate compositions, a key strength in Fincher's work. His film continues as Henrik calls up the policeman Morel, and they discuss the plant's existence. After this discussion, Fincher cuts to his very stylized 3D animated opening credits. Oplev's version of the opening takes on a very different approach. He leaves out the discussion with the police officer, focusing solely on Henrik. It allows the audience to focus on the pure mysterious factor of what the package's meaning is in relation to the elderly man crying over it. Then, when Oplev cuts to the credits, he contrasts Fincher's animation sequence by choosing to open with a steady zoom into a picture of the woman who the audience will soon come to realize is what the film's mystery is based on, Harriet Wagner, a picture that we will see over and over again, a thematic link between a life of the past and the current lives of those today, creating its first link to the theme of a seemingly never-ending circular path of cruelty and injustice towards women. It's what the two directors choose to show next that ultimately sets the movies light years apart. In Fincher's film, the cut takes us to a shot of Mikael, played by Daniel Craig, descending a staircase only to be met by a group of journalists as he snidely remarks,
"What is it? Media event of the year."
In one continuous shot, the camera follows him from the staircase and continues as he exits the building. It establishes that he is the central focus. The camera moves where he moves. The match on action to him exiting the building allows him to enter centrally framed by a sea of reporters covered in black rain jackets and black umbrellas, highlighting him in the center. The film immediately begins to condition the audience to look for him at the center of all that happens. In a sea of questions and unknowns, he is who we're supposed to look to. What we get from Oplev's version is something very different. After the title, he cuts to a dolly shot in motion, as the camera lingers behind the back of a mysterious figure that eventually we'll come to find out is Lisbeth. The camera floats with her as she walks through a nighttime exterior, continuing into this subway-type setting. Through these opening shots, her hooded, small body centrally dominates the frame. And the fourth shot in the sequence cuts to a profile of Lisbeth with her face mostly covered by the hood, connecting the audience to this mysterious character and creating a desire to find out who she is and what's going on. The suspense around her is immediately building from the start. After this sequence, Oplev cuts to the interior of a courtroom. The credits continue over these images, but the audience is put right into the story. The composition of this first courtroom shot reveals a collection of people, seated screen right and profile looking screen left. The shallow depth of field keeps focus on a small slice of a single character, a similar face in profile that we saw just moments ago in the previous sequence. Again, what we will understand later to be Lisbeth's face. The camera continues to cut around the space, showing the prominent players in the current court case, the judge, Wernerstrom, and Mikael. Let's just consider the difference between these two openings. Fincher has this strange video game-esque title sequence that cuts right to Mikael. It seems to state that the movie is directly about this man, as it continues to follow him from the courtroom to a cafe, and eventually to the building where he works without ever even introducing Lisbeth. Oplev has the simple title over a zoom into a photo of the missing Harriet, and he cuts directly to the sequence that follows Lisbeth into the courtroom. Oplev's film connects the missing Harriet to the current Lisbeth with a direct cut from one to the other, creating a link between these two women that the audience will come to find out is a link based on the central theme of violence towards women decade after decade. Oplev also makes sure that Lisbeth's character is shown before we ever see Mikael, inside of that courtroom or anywhere else, solidifying her as a prominent character. One film denies you the girl with the dragon tattoo, and the other establishes her presence before the male lead. If we continue to skip forward in Fincher's version to the first moment the audience is introduced to Lisbeth's character, the differences in representation continue to appear in staging, shot structure, dialogue, and the actors' performances. Two very different approaches to the source material. Fincher starts the scene with an insert shot of the report on Mikael, his photo front and center, further reminding the audience of Mikael and his central role in this film. It cuts to an overhead shot of two men, Armansky and Frode. Dialogue starts over this shot with Lisbeth's boss, Armansky, and Frode speaking about how, even though Armansky spoke with Lisbeth, it accounts for very little.
It's possible we could wait forever.
You called her and spoke to her, didn't you?
I'm afraid that doesn't mean much.
Degrading her character right off the bat. Then we finally see Lisbeth arrive on her motorcycle, late to the meeting. Fincher also places the audience in Armansky's POV, setting him as the anchor point for this scene, and while the book does take Armansky's point of view, in a moment we'll talk about how that doesn't work as well in this adaptation. Upon the very first introduction of Lisbeth, Fincher, through the character of Armansky, makes Lisbeth's character seem smaller and less powerful. There is a loose shot match between her and Mikael in a previous scene as she walks through the office, showing them both as people who are alienated in their workplaces. But any of that badass energy her character should have is soon snuffed out as she enters the room and is framed as if she's a kid in the school being called into a principal's office. Even if we didn't get the condescending tone from Froda, the blocking, framing, and body language says everything. The two men have all the power in the room and push her for answers as if she didn't already do the job that she was hired to do. Armansky and Froda sit at the head of the table, posed in a powerful position, while Lisbeth sits slumped in her chair facing the door like a child put on timeout. All the while we remain in Armansky's point of view. Also, just the fact that her character arrived so late and remained so seemingly uninterested in what she was doing starkly contrasts the professionalism that we see in Oplev's version of the film. In this version, it's Armansky and Froda that actually entered the meeting room, with Lisbeth waiting for them. A complete reversal from what we see in Fincher's version. Lisbeth is not only there on time, but she's early because she's committed to the work that she's doing. We also see a difference in camera placement, with Lisbeth first being shown in this scene from a low-angle shot. This often creates what's perceived by audiences as a powerful camera angle, as if these two men need to look up at her. She takes her time as she moves through the room and has no issues meeting the gaze of Armansky or Froda. The next big difference is where she sits. In Fincher's, we saw that she's at the end of the table facing the door, doesn't want to look at the two men. But in Oplev's, she sits directly between them in the middle of all the action. The next shot is a close-up of Froda as he sits screen right and continues to size up Lisbeth. And this shot is over Lisbeth's shoulder, but also reveals a bit of her face. Now, you might argue that this is also Armansky's POV, but it becomes apparent that this isn't the case when Oplev never cuts to Armansky with his own close-up to reveal his facial expressions during the meeting. Oplev does not see Armansky as a crucial entity in the scene. And even when we do see a reverse shot, Armansky is out of focus in the background, cementing that we're getting the important information in this scene from Lisbeth and Froda. At the end of the scene, Lisbeth stands annoyed with the constant slew of questions, and when the shot jumps across the table, we see her standing at the door, towering over the two men sitting down at the table. She remains in the power position throughout the entire scene. And that's just totally different from what we see in Fincher's version. Now, some people might argue that Fincher follows the book more faithfully than the Swedish film, but it becomes apparent when looking at the framing, mise-en-scène, and total shot structure that Fincher actually misses the main point of the book completely. The scene between Lisbeth, Armansky, and Froda takes up a total of 25 pages in the book, being told from Armansky's point of view. But the filmmakers have to condense it to roughly 3 minutes of screen time, or 3 pages of the script. So it's really important to filter the message of this chapter into something that's digestible for the audience's brain without losing the important details, as every moment in a film counts. Let's take a look at some passages from the book and really try to dissect what the essence of this scene really is. A more serious problem was that he could not be sure of his own feelings for the young woman. She was like a nagging itch, repellent and at the same time tempting. It was not a sexual attraction, at least he did not think so. Armansky reaches the point where he purely wants an emotional response from Lisbeth. He's seeking the comfort of a casual friendship between himself and the closed-off Lisbeth who he admires. Larson writes, Armansky felt so provoked by her lack of emotional response that sometimes he wanted to grab hold of her and shake her, to force his way into her shell and win her friendship, or at least her respect. Looking back at the two filmmakers' different approaches to the scene, it's apparent that while Fincher's visual construction is more complex than Oplev's simple coverage style of the scene, it does not make his version better. If anything, Fincher misunderstood the power dynamic that was actually discussed in the book. By placing the sequence in Armansky's point of view, the audience is told that his character is who we are identifying with as we watch what's happening through his eyes. Yes, the book is told through Armansky's voice, but it devotes a number of pages to also let the audience know that Lisbeth is the power base in this relationship. So with 3 minutes to explain the dynamic between the two, why aren't we placed in Lisbeth's point of view instead? Fincher seems to take every moment he can to cut away at the power Lisbeth held in the book. He starts the scene with Lisbeth arriving late, assuming that she doesn't take her job seriously. He then lets Armansky deliver lines like,
No one here particularly likes her. I find it's much better if she works from home.
a sentiment that's not even anywhere in the novel. You could say that Fincher's shot structure was well thought out, but how it actually represented Lisbeth Salander wasn't. Beyond the shot structure, almost every other detail in Fincher's scene takes power from her character. Even if Fincher's point was to show how punk rock she is in her mannerisms, the scene just takes away any of that badass energy and makes her seem like she's being punished. In Oplev, though not as flashy, creates a totally different feeling in this moment for Lisbeth. The scene is objectively shot without any point of view. Lisbeth is on time, waiting early for the men in the meeting room. The space is now hers for the men to enter into. And she defiantly sits between the two men, looking directly into Froda's eyes when she wishes to challenge the lawyer. When Lisbeth feels that the meeting is meaningless, she gets up to leave. Oplev allows Lisbeth to hold the power over the room, using specific staging, the composition and framing of the shots, and the scene's overall shot construction. These scenes are really short within the grand scheme of the two films, but the importance resides in the timely phrase, "First impressions are everything." What each filmmaker says about these characters in around the first 10 minutes of screen time sets the wheels in motion for how they will be represented throughout the entire film. A critical analysis of these scenes shows us who Fincher and Oplev consider to be the main characters and who has the power and agency to make changes within the story. I hope you enjoyed the first video in our new series looking at films and their remakes. Hopefully you learned a little bit about The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo as well. If you have other film duos that you'd like us to take a look at, put those down in the comments below. And don't worry, I will be making another video about IMAX and that film format. Taking a little bit longer to research, but it will be coming soon. Thanks for all the support, and as always, thanks for watching.